I did it. I actually have a 3-point preach. Okay, it's more like a 2-point preach with 1, 2, and 2A, because as I'm sure you'll get to notice, point 1 is seemingly unrelated to point 2 and 3. They don't all start with the same letter, but we're halfway there. So, as you might have noticed, the Numbers passage and the John passage are linked. Unfortunately, John sort of pipped in there and stole my thunder for a whole preach and told you that in one sentence. So we're going to touch on that, but we're going to start in Numbers first. So, point 1. When I first read through the passage, one line jumped out at me. But the people became impatient on the way. How many times is that us? I will gladly be the first person to put my hand up. Now, I tend to think I'm a pretty patient person. However, when it comes to God and where he's leading me, no. I want to have arrived like 6 months ago. Many of my prayers recently have been along the lines of, God, isn't it just about time that you did, etc., etc. And much like the Israelites, God is probably looking at me thinking, oh, but you don't see what's just around the corner and how good it is. That is, of course, not to say that sometimes the corner isn't really far away. Sometimes the road is long and we can't even see a corner. Sometimes maybe it's months or years away. God had promised the Israelites a land to settle in, a land flowing with milk and honey, which when we talked about this infusion the other week, the kids decided it must be a land filled with cows and beehives, which I think is a really good mental picture you should all take away with you. So God had promised them this land, but the way to get there was difficult, and they found it hard to trust God, even with all the times they'd seen him come through for them. The point is that God sees the big picture, and we usually don't, because we can't. We're not outside of time like God is, and we're very much just in our situation. To be honest, the Israelites were impatient on day 2. As soon as they got through the Red Sea, they did a lot of moaning, a lot of trying to fix things by themselves, which usually made it worse, and quite a lot of blaming God. We can all probably relate to at least one of those things, if not all 3. Getting impatient with waiting and not knowing, feeling miserable about it, and having a bit of a moan, these aren't all inherently terrible things. Not helpful things, sure, but not terrible. In fact, they're just very human. It wasn't the impatience in and of itself that led to the poisonous snake infestation for the Israelites, but the actions that came out of their impatience. For them, it was speaking out against Moses and God. For us, maybe it's acting out of anger when we get impatient with someone. Maybe you've asked the kids 10 times to clear their room and you finally lose your patience. My mum is probably nodding along because I speak as someone who was notoriously bad at keeping my room tidy when I was younger. We won't talk about what it looks like now. Or maybe you're driving along and the person in front of you is just crawling along under the speed limit, or they haven't noticed that the traffic light has changed to green. And these are quite simple examples, and you can probably think of a whole range more. We all get impatient. I didn't want to join mentioning COVID in my preach bandwagon, but it's a really good example. We're nearing a year since we went into lockdown. For some, it's weirdly gone quickly. For others, it's dragged painfully slowly. Some people's lives have kept a level of normality. Some people's lives have really been turned upside down. But what we can all agree on is that we're just a bit fed up of it now. Everyone I speak to says, I'm just bored, and I'm done with this, and I'm frustrated, and I just want it to be over. We're impatient for life to go back to normal. And that's not a bad thing. It's natural. And I have no doubt about just how many times, "Why is this happening, God?" has been said. Feelings are a huge part of being human. What you feel is valid. It's the actions that come out of those feelings that we need to be careful about. So that was point one, impatience. So let's move on to the connection between the passages in Numbers and John. Just as Moses lifted up the snake in the wilderness, so the Son of Man must be lifted up, that everyone who believes may have eternal life in him. Brian Simmons, the lead translator of the Passion Translation, notes that the Hebrew uses a word, seraph, which means a fiery one or a fiery serpent. He goes on to say that all humanity has been bitten by the snake of sin, but Jesus was raised up on the cross for all to see. We only need to look to him and believe, and we are saved from that venomous bite. In the Message translation, it says that just as it was necessary for the serpent to be raised up so people could have something to see and then believe, so it is necessary for the Son of Man to be lifted up. It's hard to believe in and trust things that we can't see. As the disciple Thomas said once Jesus had risen, "I won't believe it until I see it with my own eyes and I can put my fingers in the holes in his hands." Sometimes we need something to look up to and then believe in. Symbols can be of real help. We still use crosses to remind us of what Jesus did for us. In verse 16, whoever believes in him. Again, Brian Simmons notes that true faith, the Greek word pistis, contains a number of components. Acceptance, embracing something or someone as truth, union with God, and an inner confidence that God alone is enough. And that's what the Israelites lacked on so many occasions. They'd seen what God could do and had done for them, but they faltered and doubted that he alone was enough. And I think that we can find ourselves having those doubts too. When things get difficult, when times are hard, it's easy to forget all the good stuff God has done and just feel like it's all going to pot and forget that he alone is enough. So we just have to look up and believe, right? Sounds simple? It is. It's not a trick question. So why is it sometimes so hard? It's so straightforward and simple that we're suspicious of it. It's like when you hand out free chocolate on the street. People immediately assume that there's something wrong with it. A surprising amount of people, actually. There's a story in the Old Testament that helps illustrate this. There was a guy called Naaman. He was a commander in the army, and he had leprosy. One of his wife's servants was a girl from Israel, and she said, if he just went to the prophet in Samaria, he could be healed. So off Naaman goes. Long story short, he meets the prophet Elisha, who says to him, go and wash 7 times in the Jordan, and you'll be healed. Sounds completely easy as nothing to it, right? No. Naaman was fuming, ranting that he thought Elisha was going to come to him, stand and call on the name of the Lord, wave his hand over him, and he'd be healed. What was so special about the Jordan River anyway? Why was it better than their rivers? He was just really annoyed, and off he went in a rage. But his servants went to him and said, if the prophet had told you to go and do some great thing, wouldn't you have done it? How much more then should you just go and do this really simple thing that they've said? So he does. He goes and dips himself in the Jordan 7 times, and he's completely healed, and it's all amazing. But there's something to be said there, isn't there? When things seem so simple, it's easy to be suspicious and not interested in them. We don't have to go and slay dragons, jump through hoops to be saved. Jesus did all the heavy lifting. We just need to look up and believe. So we've had impatience, and we've had just believe. So now we're on to point 3, which I always like this part, when someone said they've got 3 points, and they get to point 3, and you know you are on the home stretch. So hopefully, as a smooth transition from just look up and believe, we're going to talk about grace. God's grace is a gift. It's not dependent on anything we do. We can't buy it, we can't earn it. It is a gift. As with all gifts, you just have to accept them. And then, of course, open them, because otherwise, what's the point? You don't know what's in it until you've opened it. And even if you get told what it is, you can't enjoy it until you open it. Imagine at Christmas and holidays if we all just got piles of presents and then just left them neatly wrapped in their piles. It would be completely pointless. I don't know about any of you, but I love presents. And I am all about ripping that paper off and seeing what's inside it as soon as possible and getting on to the fun part of enjoying your present. In recent years, I've actually had to start, just peeling it away piece by piece of sellotape just to make the whole process last longer, which used to really annoy me when my sister did this and we'd be waiting for her for hours. But actually, I can see the value in it now. And I like to think that God's grace is like that too. All we have to do is accept it, accept the gift that's offered to us. However, we do need to open the gift to fully enjoy it and reap the benefits of it. There's no point just putting it up on a shelf somewhere to look pretty. Our young adults life group, we've been watching a series on grace, and last week the pastor talked about how when Paul and Silas were in prison and there was that earthquake and all their chains broke and the jailer came running in and was about to fall on his sword because he thought all the prisoners had gone, and Paul was like, "Don't worry, we're all here." The jailer asked, "What do I have to do to be saved?" And Paul said, "Just believe." He didn't say, believe plus do all this other long list of things, get your whole life in order, follow this strict process, and then maybe you're in with a chance. Nope, just believe and accept the gift that's offered. It's a weird conundrum, really, because God's grace is free, and we don't have to do anything to earn it. But at the same time, we do have to do something because we have to accept it. Or at least we have to accept it to fully reap the rewards and benefits of it. And there we have it. Impatience. We all feel it, but we can choose what actions we allow to come out of those feelings. And it's important to remember that God sees the big picture, even when we can't. Next, look up and believe. It's straightforward, yet totally legitimate. And finally, grace. God's grace is a gift. We just have to accept it, open it, and enjoy it.